Hello. I am a very normal, very sane individual. I am not at all neurotic or autistic in any way. I definitely think in normal ways about things. So here's the big graph I made of different ways of thinking about relationships. This graph I made of relationship frameworks. Because I have no idea what I want from a relationship, which is a good thing to figure out at some point, as especially as you mature, to try and figure out what you want from a relationship. So I try to compare and contrast them. So on this graph that I've got right here, I've got it listed out. Two axes, right? Low to high level of commitment is one axis, and the other one is high number of partners to low number of partners. So, the idea here is that I kind of have to choose between a variety of different approaches. Like let's say you go on a dating app. The things that you have to write down are things like, Am I looking for just a friend, or casual sex, or friends with benefits, which I just realized is not on the chart, or monogamous relationship, or ethical non-monogamy, or what are you looking for? And the thing is, here's the thing. As I lay down in this crevice, here's the thing. Is people don't realize it. But you kind of need to have a solid opinion in order to act. Like, it matters what I believe is the best relationship framework. But that kind of conflicts with a sort of a tolerant, liberal attitude of like, oh, come on, man, it's all the same. You do you, I'll do me. It's like, it's all you do you, I'll do me, until I start to try and figure out what the best approach is for myself. And then I have to actually make value judgments. So if you're as conflicted and neurotic as I am, you end up struggling to make a choice, and you have to choose a framework, because if you don't, you're going to miss out on a bunch of people who want a different framework. If I decide wrong, right? If I decide, oh, I'm only interested in monogamy, and then I miss out on a bunch of people who are polyamorous, who could have been great for me. It could have been a great relationship, but I decided on the wrong framework for dating in my head. So I missed out on that opportunity. So let's take a look at some of these options here, right? Let's start doing a tour of the options here. I realized that I didn't put friends with benefits, which maybe is something I should put on here. But let's look at the options, all right? So I've got hookup culture. Hookup culture is in the low commitment, high number of partners area. Some of the benefits of hookup culture is that, you get to have sex with a lot of different people, really low barrier to entry. This is a very, very easy dynamic to find, theoretically, probably, maybe, it's complicated. Downsides, is that, maybe you have a day where you want somebody, to have sex with you, or to be intimate with you. But there's just nobody around. There's just nobody at that moment. And because you're not in an established dynamic of any kind with any one particular individual, if you can't find somebody who just happens to be around and down on that particular day, you miss out on that. You also, you miss out on like the stronger sort of emotional bond of a relationship, and there's a lot of benefits to a more committed relationship that you miss out on if you're engaging in sort of hookup culture. towards the middle here, because I had it over here in two wrong spots because I'm an idiot, is relationship anarchy. All right, so relationship anarchy is up here because it's high number of partners, right? High number of partners, but I put it in the middle of the commitment spectrum. Now, why is it in the middle of the commitment spectrum? So the reason for this is because relationship anarchy is it's a polyamorous framework, sort of, but it's a response to something within polyamorous communities where people will have like I should turn this towards me now. I should be talking now. It's a response to some people will have like a primary partner, like they'll be married and they'll be in an open marriage and they'll sleep with other people on the side. But the people that they sleep with on the side, they're not necessarily like meaningful to them. They're not going to make any like real commitment to those people. But then they have their primary partner who they're like in love with and married to, and so on and so forth. It's not always marriage based, but the term primary partner and like secondary partner and third and so on and so forth emerged in a lot of polyamorous circles. And so relationship anarchy is a form of polyamory that explicitly denounces and rejects that. It's basically trying to say, well, hey, no, to me, the point of polyamory is that all my relationships are equal. I don't want anybody to feel like, oh, you're the one that I love and who's my primary partner, and I have these other people, but they're not that important to me. Like, because it kind of emphasizes the idea that love is like a scarce resource, and that you can only have one partner who is like the love of your life. But then everybody else has to be secondary to that person. And a lot of people in polyamorous circles are trying to deconstruct and reject that idea. So that doesn't really work for them. In practice, this non-hierarchical approach is kind of poorly defined. In my experience, people don't really have a clear line of where the hierarchy begins and ends. Theoretically, there are a lot of people within a relationship anarchy who do obviously acknowledge that somebody who you just met and have gone on like one date with isn't going to be as important to you as your partner of like 5 years, but also just saying that kind of reifies the primary secondary distinction that the whole movement is designed to reject. So there's a bit of a like feeling it out in real life, in practice, kind of a contradiction there. Not necessarily a contradiction, it might just be nuance, but there's like a bit of a contradiction there. And I put it on this chart because I wanted to discuss like sort of labelless relationships, because relationship anarchy isn't quite a labelless relationship, but I think there's a lot of overlap there. So I'm gonna talk about that. I'm not a fan. I'm not a fan of relationship dynamics where you strongly avoid labels. I find that can be fairly abusive. It works very well for somebody who wants to be able to retrieve a high level of commitment from their partner without giving a high level of commitment in return. So like on this chart, hookups, it's kind of mutual. Low level of commitment. Everybody involved is in agreement that there's a low level of commitment. Within the relationship anarchy / like sort of labelless relationship category that I put on here, in my opinion, the problem with that is that it's often like kind of an abusive relationship where, maybe one partner is feeling a sense of high levels of commitment, and they commit themselves, their time, their energy, their romantic attention to this one partner, who then maybe doesn't commit the same level in return. That's why I'm not a huge fan of the absence of labels, is because without labels, one partner can feel one thing and the other partner can feel a different thing, and that imbalance leads to a lot of abuse, I think. So then over on the far right here, I've got a third relationship framework. This is demi-polyamory. Okay, so demi-polyamory is a term I made up off the top of my goddamn head, and what it effectively means is it's a mixture of like demisexuality and polyamory. So demisexual is a term that basically just means that you need to be engaged romantically before you have any interest in sex or sexuality. So demi-polyamory sort of takes this logic and applies it to a polyamorous framework. This is a framework where everybody involved in your polyamorous, series of relationships, every relationship that you're in is one where you have built a strong sense of commitment to one another prior to engaging in any kind of physical activity. So it is like a high level of, we're going to have a strong relationship. Within a demi-polyamorous framework, I would say that there is no one-night stands, really. That's just not a thing that you do with partners. So it's kind of a style of polyamory. And the reason I wanted to do that was because I think that polyamory tends to be thought of kind of in the relationship anarchy terms, kind of in the, anything goes kind of terms. And I do think there is, hypothetically at least, a variation of polyamory you could embrace where you are passionate about mutual commitment, but where also you still see other people. So it's like it rejects the idea that there is one person for you, but maintains the idea that we need to make strong mutual commitments to one another. I like that. I like that as a concept. I think that's probably my favorite relationship framework on here. I also think it contrasts well with traditional marriage and traditional monogamy, right? So traditional marriage on this chart is, I'm thinking of no sex before marriage. I'm thinking real old school traditional marriage. So we're talking about people who want you to be a virgin. They do not want to have had sex before marriage. They want to find one person and stay with them together. And I think, that if you wanted to look for like a positive side of this, because I think people in the modern day, this is an unpopular way of doing it. So I think in the modern day, people already know the negatives of traditional marriage. I think if you want to look for the positives of it, I think the positives is that putting someone on sort of an altar like this can be good, can be a good thing. It can be disastrous if you put somebody on this high pillar and then collapse from it, and then it falls apart, But it can also be, I think it can also be really good. Having lived in the world that I live in now, where maybe some of these other frameworks are a bit more socially acceptable than this one, I've come to acknowledge that there is a sort of a value in being able to say, wow, I really prefer this person to anyone else, and I've made a real commitment to them that has real consequences. That it's not just like a person who is, the dynamic isn't just mutually advantageous for me at this moment. I think that when relationships are based on what's mutually advantageous at this moment, sort of an Ayn Randian approach to relationships. Oh, well, hey, it's mutually beneficial. We both get something out of it. Then the second it ceases to be beneficial for you to treat that other person with respect, you're not going to. And so that turns into a kind of dynamic where people pick each other up and put each other back down. And that feels terrible. It feels terrible to be treated as disposable by one another all the time. I think that's really what happens in hookup culture, is we treat one another as disposable because hypothetically we could find somebody else. And even if we can, we're not thinking in the long term. I don't think we're encouraged by the incentive structure of a fully voluntary short-term system like hookup culture to think long-term. Obviously, the downsides of traditional marriage have made themselves very clear. That is, you marry the wrong person, you're stuck with them for life. That's a pretty huge downside. The strict punishment of early experimentation, like you're trying to date around and try to find the right person. There's no real search period in traditional marriage, because like I said, you're not allowed to have sex before marriage, really, within this framework. So without this search period, you could just be strictly punished. It's very prudish. There's a lot of downfall from this. A lot of slut shaming, or even like sort of man slut shaming, I guess, of of just being too overtly sexual. And not being able to commit enough. I think that has a real psychological cost on a lot of the population, and I think that's why in the long run we rejected this framework. So then, what we moved on to when we rejected that framework is what I'm calling 90s monogamy. 90s monogamy, I'm calling it 90s because I'm thinking of the show Friends. I'm thinking of the television show Friends when I think of 90s monogamy. I think sort of the pros of 90s monogamy are that, it's kind of the best of both worlds in some ways, between sort of traditional marriage and hookup culture, because in 90s monogamy, it is socially acceptable to have a one-night stand. It's socially acceptable to go on dates with somebody, maybe even have sex with them, and for it to not work out. And it's also socially acceptable to be a serial monogamist, which Helen Fischer, the neuroscientist, says is humans' natural state. So it's probably good to have a relationship framework that kind of aligns with humans' natural state of getting invested into a relationship, and maybe committing to it, but then after some time, things don't work out, maybe assuming they don't have kids, I don't know. Things fall apart, but it's okay because you can sort of slowly begin to reinvest yourself in another relationship in the future. So that's kind of the nice thing of 90s monogamy, is you get to sort of parse it out. It's not anti-commitment, but it's not universally pro-commitment either. It is a framework that sees commitment as something that flows and changes organically with the individual relationship that you enter into. Like I said, I didn't put friends with benefits on this chart. I think friends with benefits... And we're back. I think friends with benefits would probably fall on like a kind of a high number of partners, but kind of a medium commitment. But I think the distinction there with that from between friends with benefits and relationship anarchy is the label on it. Relationship anarchy presumably contains within it both romantic and non-romantic dynamics. And in fact, one thing that I hear from people who advocate relationship anarchy a lot is that the attempt to force a relationship to be either romantic or non-romantic is part of the sort of the system that they're trying to reject, the system of dating that they're trying to reject. That's part of the hierarchy that they're picking apart. That's the anarchy part of relationship anarchy, is the critique of the hierarchy of maybe, placing romantic relationships above sexual ones, or clearly defining and separating those two from one another. Would both maybe be hierarchical ways of viewing relationships. Let me turn this around. Yeah, so I think friends with benefits, that's something that this chart kind of fails to capture, actually. That's probably why it didn't end up on here, is because the distinction between sexual and romantic dynamics is kind of left off of this chart, because I'm focusing instead on the number of partners and the level of commitment. Because I think that's where the point that I am getting around to becomes the most clearest. Because so far, I framed this as mostly an individual choice. Oh, I'm an erotic individual. I need to know what to put on my dating app profile, right? And this is an individual choice that I'm making as an individual. But that's not how the real world works. The type of relationships that become common are based on the sets of incentives that individuals have that they've been handed by their society. Traditional marriage was common because there was a strict authority punishing other forms of relationship, and because there were several layers of law and financial institutions privileging this form of relationship above other forms of relationship. 90s monogamy became popular because monogamous culture was still very much in place as a result of our history of traditional marriage, and I think we were sort of in a hangover stage from traditional marriage. And I think hookup culture is what happens when you live in a society that is fully voluntary. I think that human beings, by our nature, are short-sighted. We're irrational, and we're pretty selfish. That's my belief, at least. Even if we contain a decent degree of altruism, I think that altruism runs out at a certain point. So we have to look at ourselves as within a certain boundary or constraint as being largely selfish. So I think that when left to our own devices and left to a society that is completely voluntary in terms of what kinds of relationships we have, where there's no third parties holding us accountable or providing a structure for what kind of relationships should be encouraged and what kind of relationships should be discouraged, when value hierarchies have been picked apart and the concept of stigmatizing any kind of relationship is really frowned upon. The concept of reifying any kind of relationship as in any way better than any other kind of relationship is frowned upon. What you inevitably end up with is a culture in which every individual is pressured to behave selfishly and short-sightedly, and to not really care about the long-term negative impacts that has on them, to not really care about the long-term negative impacts that has on others, or what that does to us as a society. If I chose right now demi-polyamory, which I said earlier was the framework that appealed to me the most. It contains a high degree of variety, but a high degree of commitment. It breaks down the sort of traditionalist idea that you only get one love of your life. If I chose to do that right now, that would kind of depend on me being able to find other people who are capable of commitment in an age when there is absolutely nothing stopping them from not committing to anyone ever, and just endlessly cycling through, complete strangers on the internet. I would have to be able to find people who are interested in sort of communicativeness necessary for polyamory in a society that does not in any way encourage those kinds of relationship dynamics. You have to be able to find other people, and if every single interaction I have is with people whose preference is hookup culture, where did that preference come from? Did they slowly learn it? Did they slowly, gradually adjust because that's the society we live in and that's the set of incentives they've been given? And because it's freedom, it doesn't feel as imposing. It doesn't feel as imposing as if it were the result of authority, So, yes. Relationship frameworks, postscript. Or part 2, maybe. I don't know. Maybe this is a postscript / part 2. Fully loaded. Return of the Mac. Relationship frameworks. Oh boy. So, one thing that really weighs on you when you're trying to choose what kind of relationship you think you're looking for, kind of a dynamic you think you're looking for, is, how hopeful are you that this is a dynamic that can actually exist in the real world versus just what you would like in your ideal heavenly utopia, So like traditional marriage. Maybe I like the idea that, right as I turn 18, I magically fall in love with the perfect love of my life, and then we stay together forever and ever and ever and ever, and I never have to date, and I never have to worry about any of that, and we have amazing sex, and everything's great, and we raise kids together, and it's wonderful. Maybe I dream about that, but then maybe somebody tells me that, like, the majority of marriages end in divorce. And that, if I think my marriage is going to last forever, I got another thing coming called reality, probably. And that also, the more I invest into this monogamous framework, where I have a commitment to only be with them forever, and they have a commitment to only be with me forever, the more I invest in that idea emotionally, the more traumatic and painful it's going to be when it doesn't work out. Because if I believe in, say, 90s monogamy, right, then now it's like, if the relationship ends, that's expected. That's part of it. Serial monogamy, you have a relationship, it's great, it lasts years, it ends, it sucks when it ends, but maybe you'll find love again. You'll find someone new. But then even even 90s monogamy has kind of a similar problem. Like, so you want to believe you can have 90s monogamy, but that kind of relies on a hopefulness that whatever relationship you're in is going to remain monogamous. Right? You want to be monogamous, but cheating happens, and the more mental energy you invest in the idea that it's important to you to be monogamous, that you want your partner to only want you, and for you to only want your partner, the more it's gonna hurt when they cheat on you. I often think that, I want monogamy, but that if I entered into a monogamous relationship with somebody and then they cheated on me, it would just hurt me so much that it might actually be better to just commit myself ahead of time to one of these more polyamorous frameworks. That way, I can't be cheated on. I can't be cheated on because from the get-go, I built in to my mentality that they were going to sleep with other people. That was always going to be part of it, and I don't expect anything else from it. But on the other hand, isn't that kind of a nihilistic thing? Like, if I want monogamy, isn't it kind of nihilistic and hopeless to be like, well, I expect that I'm not going to get it anyways. I expect that they're going to sleep with other people, and there's nothing I can do about that. There's nothing I can do about it, even if I want to. I need to just live in fear. I need to live in fear of being cheated on so much that I commit myself to a relationship framework where my partners have other partners, even though idealistically I would maybe prefer not for that to be the case. I would maybe prefer to be their one and only special little boy, was what I was going to say before the footage cut out on me. Let me see if I can remember where I left off. Special little boy so even then, if you look at polyamorous frameworks, right? So now I've lost hope. I've lost the hopefulness of the one true love forever framework. I've lost the hopefulness of the monogamous framework. And now I'm looking at more like a demi-polyamory kind of a framework, or maybe just generally a polyamorous framework. And so, again, it's like, oh, well, that assumes a pretty high level of hope. It assumes enough hopefulness that somebody's going to want to have sort of this long-term relationship with me. The complete, I guess at the end of the day, the complete hopeless framework isn't really on this graph. I'm realizing as I get to the end of this, the complete hopeless framework is like a friend zone. It's like a friend zone forever framework. Like maybe like a vol cell framework. Vol cell, voluntarily celibate. And in aside from like religious people, vol cells on the internet are typically men who are so fed up with women, so done with women and dating, that they've decided to swear off sex and relationships entirely. So that's really, I think that's the bottom of the nihilism pit when it comes to relationships. The bottom of the hopelessness pit is that you kind of cease in even believing in having any kind of a relationship at all, whether it be hookups or a girlfriend monogamously or polyamory. None of that feels within reach, and in fact it probably feels like trying to have it is only going to get you hurt. Like, it's important to note that none of this is just the belief that it's not just the belief that you can't have what you want. It's the belief that what you want is unrealistic in a way that is actively going to hurt you. So there's the process, I think, that every human being has to go through, that most people kind of unconsciously go through vibes, that I, as kind of a neurotic person, have to consciously sift through and break down. That is the adjustment of your expectations to reality, the adjustment of how hopeful should I be to how hopeless should I be. And a lot of this is cultural too. And you know, depending on the time you're in, maybe this seemed like a viable option. Maybe for a lot of people, this seemed like a legitimate thing that you could expect to happen in your life. And nowadays, definitely not. And this one, like, even that one's not looking so great, you know. And I think there's something also that kind of is going on here, under the surface. Like, maybe I don't necessarily suggest that we return to any of the restrictiveness of traditional marriage, but I do think that there is something that happened where, yeah, you used to be able to own a home, but now my whole generation pretty much can't, you know? Again, not a one-to-one comparison here. I don't necessarily think we should be returning to traditional marriage. I also don't think that, you know, owning a big fancy house is a good priority for the economy to set for itself. I don't think like making sure everybody can own like a suburban middle class home is a good goal to set for our society. So I guess maybe it is a little bit more of a one-to-one comparison than I realized. But yeah, it's not just that you can't afford to own a home nowadays. There's something cultural that happened underneath that too, a loss of hope. That it's not just that I can't own a home, it's just that, like, if the economy suddenly got better and my generation was able to afford a home now, having not been able to for so long, why would I burden myself with that chain of financial responsibility by trying to own a home, because the economy could sink again. I could lose the financial capacity to afford that standard of living. You know, that standard of living, having lived without it for so long, it's made me feel as though that's a very likely thing to happen. You know, where we're more aware that even if things get better, that they could always get worse. And I think there's something to that in terms of relationship frameworks.